Welcome to the Rock Newman Show.
It's the Rock Newman Show.
Welcome back to the Rock Newman Show. Again, today is Saturday, July the 27th, 2013. And I want to jump right into introducing our next guest because we have a bunch to talk about. Her name is Dr. Janette Hoston Harris. She is the official historian for the District of Columbia. There are many places we can start with Dr. Harris. First, I just must go. Dr. Harris, welcome to the Rock Newman Show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
As I mentioned earlier in the program, Dr. Harris in 1960 participated in a sit-in in Louisiana. She was attending Southern University at a turbulent time. First of all, it was a very courageous thing to do. You know, the progress that we've made today, that Barack Obama is the president of the United States, he really is standing on the shoulders of people like Dr. Hoston Harris. She was expelled from Southern University and banned by the governor from attending any other institutions in the state of Louisiana. Dr. Hoston, before we get into talking about Washington, D.C., can you walk us back down memory lane to that time where you were involved in that protest, what it felt like participating in that protest, and then how you felt about the recriminations afterwards?
Well, that's a good question. Rock, you have done your research. I'm impressed. My life as an activist began in junior high school in Monroe, Louisiana, where my daddy was active, and after the Brown versus Board of Education decision. Before that, blacks could not register to vote in Louisiana. So my job was, and I'm giving you this background to understand how I became this activist.
Feel free.
My background, my responsibility was to teach blacks the preamble to the U.S. Constitution to register to vote, not vote.
Because
to register.
you had to know that.
You had to know
in
that
order
to
register.
put your name down on that list in the courthouse.
Right.
And so we would.
And because I like to do this, I like to parse out stuff. So black folks then in the late 50s. Now we're talking late 50s after Brown versus Board of Education, 1954.
Right.
You had to know the preamble in order to register to vote.
In my hometown.
In your hometown.
Right.
Now, did the white folks have to know that?
Absolutely not. And I remember taking my grandmother down. My daddy had this car that we took people to the courthouse. And it was intimidating because they were sitting in front of all these whites, and the look and the stare kind of made them feel like something was going to happen. And then they were afraid, but they had learned it.
Right.
And so my grandmother missed one word, and she had to come back the next day. They would not let her register. So that's the kind of intimidation blacks went through, and I was involved in. My daddy started the first black library in my hometown, the first black swimming pool. And so these things were evolving as I was growing. So I grew up with this in my soul, okay?
Yeah.
And so going off, there was no discussion whether I was going to college or not. That was a foregone conclusion. Yeah. So my dad, packed us up, took us to Southern University.
Higher education was very important.
Very important. That was the only thing they knew that we had to do.
Right.
So we went to Southern. Southern was a good experience for me. Being away from home is always a good experience. When you don't have mom and daddy looking over your shoulders. But it was a good experience. And in February of 1960, when the students at North Carolina A&T sat in, those of us who were leaders at Southern University, I was over the drill team. I was the president of a social sorority.
Now, the drill team associated, did they have the dancing dolls back then?
No, they didn't have the dancing dolls, but we had the first girls drill team. So we did the little dancing or whatever that was supposed to be, but dancing dolls came on much later.
Okay.
But anyway, we wanted to do something to support the students at North Carolina.
Right.
So we came together, 7 of us, in the law school, and we talked. I'm president of our of our senior class, and we talked about what we wanted to do, various things, and we decided, and I decided really, that whatever we decide to do, we laid out this whole list of things. Do it in secretive. Don't let us know it till the last minute. We'll be prepared, whatever it is. That's how our sit-in was a surprise to everybody.
Right.
Because they came and got us at a certain time on March 28th, 1960.
Yeah.
And we all came together, got in a car, and went downtown to Baton Rouge. It's a S.H. Crest, which is a five and dime store.
Yes.
And we went in and we bought things.
Right.
We all purchased things.
Right.
And after we purchased things, we decided to sit at the counter and order something.
Right.
And we were told we couldn't sit there because that was a round table in the corner with a curtain that you stood back there and you ate or you drank or whatever you did.
That was the colorful.
That was the colorful section. So we did not do that. We sat down, and we told we could not be served, and we continued to sit.
Right.
I didn't realize I was sitting next to the manager, and I ordered tea, and the lady kept looking at me, and she kept saying, "No, I'll bring it to the corner." I said, "No, you bring it here."
Yeah.
So we did not move. And, of course, they called the police. Right. And the paddy wagon came, and the police and the dogs, and they threw us in the paddy wagon. And off to jail we went. We had already met with the NAACP, so we knew we had some support in the background.
Right.
And so they took us off to jail, fingerprinted us, and all of that. And they put us in the cells with real people, real criminals. Yeah. This was no plaything. Yeah. So it was very frightening for me and all the other students. Because the girls were in one section, the men were in another section. And so the women in there were real criminals.
Wow.
And they made it known they were real criminals.
You guys, college students who's sitting in, put you in with the hard-nosed.
With the hard-nosed criminals. Right. And, I learned at that point, that I would not do anything wrong because I did not want to return to a jail cell. It was in Louisiana in March, it was like 100 degrees, hot. Yeah. The cots were lined with army blankets. Yeah. The toilet sat in the middle of the floor, and the shower was in the middle of the floor. Oh, boy. Dirty, had never been clean, seemed like. And you had to take a shower, you had to use a toilet, and you had to eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich by 8 o'clock when lights go out. Right. So, that just... Not
a place you wanted to be.
No, those days I was a smoker. I was smoking. It was fashionable to smoke in the 60s. Right. And one lady, I asked her, why was she in? And she said, well, I just shot him. Just shot him dead. I said, oh, you did? Wow. That kind of thing, Yeah. And somebody stole something or accused of stealing.
And so you guys sat in somewhere later. Now, was it that particular arrest that got Thurgood Marshall involved in your life in one of your cases?
Yes, it was doing that. The NAACP got Thurgood Marshall involved, Johnny Jones from attorney in Baton Rouge, involved in the case. And after we got out of jail, we went back to the campus. There was a full-scale uprising. Right. And my mother's friend...
What, was it a full-scale uprising
over
you all's arrest?
Yes, over our arrest. And that what would the president do? I mean, what's going to happen to us then? Right. And so we went back to our dormitories, and my mother's friend was on the switchboard, and she called and said, I'm going to send my station wagon to pick you up because they're going to move you out of the city overnight, put you on a train. She's on the switchboard. She heard the president. Yeah. So she hit us out.
Heard the president of the university.
President Felton Clark said, told his security guards, go get them, put them on a train, and send them home. And now,
was that for expulsion? That's
for the
punitive?
city.
That was punitive, or was that for protection so that you guys?
No, it wasn't protection. It was punitive. Right. You see, the school board, the State Board of Education gave funds to the black colleges. Yes. So Governor O.K. Long said, unless you do this, we cut off your funding. Right. So he was really between a rock and a hard place. He didn't know what to do. Right. So after the big uprising and all that, he expelled us from school. I was a senior. Then one freshman, everybody else was senior or law school students. And so we stayed in Baton Rouge. She hid us out in her house. And other people hid us out in their basements. And we met with Thurgood Marshall's people. We met with the NAACP, and they really helped secure our safety while we met and planned what to do next. Because we went to court almost every other week. We were going to Louisiana courts. And the case in Louisiana, the first sit-in case, was named Hoston versus State of Louisiana et al. It was named for me, so my daddy was in trouble then.
Yes. I want to take a moment here because we are, I've announced several times today that today was July the 27th, 2013. So that's where we are. We're in 2013. And oftentimes people ask the question or make the criticism, oh, why do you keep going back and talking about past times?
Right.
And we're at a time now where the Supreme Court of the United States just gutted the teeth of the Voting Rights Act, which helps to ensure some degree of fairness in voting. And we're talking about, and we have people that are in the disadvantaged, disenfranchised communities who still talking about my vote might not count. And Dr. Hoston Harris here is just recanting a time when, because she was at a five and dime, Crest, ultimately five and dime, had made purchases, but wouldn't be allowed the dignity to be able to sit at the counter and get a cup of tea, went to jail, got expelled from school as a senior, she and other law students paid that kind of price so that we can enjoy some of the accoutrements of the efforts that you made. And pardon me, I'll get off the soapbox, but I just want to say, we're going to take we're just going to do damage to people to say our vote don't count. Just don't say it.
Right.
So Thurgood Marshall got involved in the case.
Right.
Tell us what happened.
We went to court throughout the state, and Thurgood Marshall took the case along with Walter White from the NAACP, James Neighbor, because Howard had a mock trial to see if we were going in 1961 to see if we were really going to jail or not.
Right.
And the case went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court determined that we did not breach any peace by sitting there. It was a public place.
Right.
So we really opened up the door for integration at lunch counters.
Yeah.
Because our case was the only sit-in case to go to the United States Supreme Court. The others went through state courts.
Right.
But Thurgood Marshall took our case to the Supreme Court, and much is not written about our case because they always talk about the first case of sit-in, but they never talk about the one that really paved the way.
Yeah, that actually
pave the way
all the way through
all
the
the way,
court.
right, all the way through the courts. And so once we were expelled from Southern, all of us we were invited by Dr. Charles Harris Wesley to come to Central State University that he was president.
Right.
No other president invited us.
Right.
One person invited me to come to Connecticut, and my mother said, it's too many white people.
Yeah.
She won't work.
Yeah.
I don't want my child killed.
Yeah.
So I didn't do that. But
Right.
as a result of that, not only was I caught a lot of flack because I couldn't go home. People were afraid of me
Right.
because they were afraid of what would happen if they were with me.
Right.
But my daddy caught a lot of flack
Right.
because he was a leader.
Yeah.
And so since the case was named Hoston, they said, the all rebelizers. And one day a telephone man came into the house to repair the phone and went up in the little loft and bugged the house. So they knew everything that we were doing, going, and saying. Because at that time I was speaking out to get money for our legal defense. We all spoke out in our various towns.
Right.
And so it was a very trying time.
Right.
My dad went to jail on trumped-up charges. And it was a lot. They had to leave Monroe and move out.
You speak of, and it just reminds me sometimes that we just need people to have courage, like the president of Central State did, to invite you guys to come in, doing the right thing because the right thing is the right thing to do at the right time. Yeah. We'll be back in just a moment on the Rock Newman Show.
You'll find the deals inside here in the beautiful showroom of the all-new Pohanka Hyundai in Capitol Heights during their giant Markdown Madness sale.
Smart shoppers know that every new Hyundai in Pohanka comes with Hyundai Assurance and America's best 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. But why don't you tell them about the Markdown sale, Joe?
I'll be happy to, Kim. Folks, shop around on the web and you'll see lease payments on a new 2013 Elantra GLS at $179 a month. Today at Pohanka Hyundai, $99 a month. That's right, a $99 payment on a brand new Elantra.
And $89 a month on a new 2013 Accent GLS Automatic. How do they do it, Joe?
It must be the volume, Kim. A brand new building, hundreds of new Hyundais, and Pohanka's low payment and easy credit programs are designed to get everybody driving. But you have to get here today. Rush to the giant Markdown Madness sale at exit 13 off the Capitol Beltway.
Pohanka Hyundai, king of the Beltway. All financing for a limited term on approved HMF credit.
My baby drives a Pohanka.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rock Newman from the Rock Newman Show, and I am absolutely flattered to have as one of my fine advertisers the DMV's greatest corporate citizen. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about the Pohanka Automotive Group. If you have any automotive needs whatsoever, if you want to sell your car, buy a car, trade in your car, have your car serviced, whatever you need, see my good friends at the Pohanka Automotive Group. You will be well taken care of, I promise. I'm Rock Newman. I might be there. Come on down and see our good friends at Pohanka Automotive Group.
Welcome back, folks, to the 10 o'clock hour of the Rock Newman Show. We're going to carry over Dr. Janette Hoston Harris, one of the true sheroes of the civil rights movement. What a price she had to pay. She persevered. She was expelled from all schools in Louisiana, went to Central State, went on to get her master's and then a PhD. Dr. Harris, you were saying you actually couldn't go back to Louisiana. You couldn't get a job, and you couldn't go back. You couldn't get a job because now you had a criminal record, and you couldn't go back to Louisiana at all. Why couldn't you go back to Louisiana?
Well, what happened is that while I was at Central State, the Louisiana governor sent a group of men to come to Central State to take us back for trial. And the president said, no, you have no jurisdiction. The governor said, you have no jurisdiction in Ohio. So we knew that us going back would be retaliatory.
Right.
And so we decided that it was to our best interest not to go back.
Right.
Because during that period,
Right.
I came to Washington, D.C., which was the only place I had a cousin
Right, okay.
living, and tried to get a government job. They had advertised these PhD, they needed BA degrees in psychology, and so I went to apply at 9 o'clock in the morning and went to the Peace Corps. And the gentleman said, the job is all taken. And I said, no, it can't be taken. He said, yes, it is. Because on that form, you have to put down whether you've been in jail or not,
Right.
and why you were there.
Yeah.
So they look at that as being in jail, period.
Right. Sure.
And so I couldn't get the job, and so I got so angry. I had this big bush and dashiki, I was really
All right.
into the movement.
You was Angela Davis before Angela Davis was Angela Davis.
Right. So couldn't get the job, so came to back to my cousins, and I decided to call John F. Kennedy. And my cousin said, you don't do that up here. I said,
Right.
yes, you do. So I called John F. Kennedy's office, and he was out of the country. And she said, we'll get back to you. What's the problem? And I told her I couldn't get the job at the Peace Corps.
Right.
And so she called, I got a call the next day saying, can you come see the Attorney General, Robert Kennedy? Oh, I was so shocked. I said, of course I can.
Right.
So then I go down to the Attorney General's office, and they had this huge, Rockley had the most gorgeous conference table, the biggest conference table I've seen in my life, sitting in this office,
Right.
and one folder on it.
Wow.
One big fat folder.
Right.
And I kept looking at the folder and saying, that can't be me. That
Yeah.
just can't be me.
Yeah.
And when his assistant came in, and I asked him, the first thing I asked him was, good morning, is that my folder? He said, that's all you from the day you were born.
Wow.
I said, my God,
Yeah.
just overnight they had all this information.
Right.
But anyway, I talked to him, talked to the Attorney General, and they called back down to the Peace Corps. They had like 10 jobs available.
Yeah.
And they gave me the card, said, take this card and you go back.
Right.
And you tell them that if they can't give you that job, to call this number right away.
Right.
Well, that was the end of that.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
stayed there at the Peace Corps staff. So that was my first experience with jobs
Wow.
in
Wow.
Washington.
Yeah.
And-
Well, you know what? Let me say to my staff here, get to booking Dr. Harris for a future show for a long, we might do a couple of hours with her just straight. Part of what I promised my audience that I would do was deal a little bit with Washington, D.C., you as the historian. So tell us about the formation of Washington, D.C. How and why was it ever established?
Okay, and let me just make a footnote, if I may, that the city historian was established by Mayor Marion Barry. First time ever.
Right.
And I brought the idea to him, and he established the office. So I have to give him kudos for that.
Yes.
For insight.
I think that's a very wise decision.
Washington, D.C. was established in 1791. And the proclamation brought Washington, D.C., the federal city was in Philadelphia, moved to Washington, D.C.
When was it? 1791?
Yes, 1791.
Okay.
In fact, my daughter's birthday, July 16th.
Okay.
I always go back to 1608 when Captain John Smith came along the Potomac River and came along the Natchitoches Indians, which were later called the Anacostines, named from Anacostia, because a lot of that history started from Anacostia, and people don't realize that. Anacostia was a very flourishing area, trading, and that's where people began to live. The Indians died off eventually. Some moved to Roosevelt Island, and after that, the city began to change. It was 1790 that George Washington, of course, issued an act to establish the federal city here. In 1800, it became flourishing. In 1800, believe it or not, as soon as the city was established, you had blacks here.
Right. Because
you had slavery here, even before that.
And certainly part of what I wanted to ask you just about that was how much did slave labor have to do with the building of some of the monuments that are here, the Capitol, the White House, and the Lincoln Memorial, the Jefferson Memorial?
Okay, the British burned the city in 1815.
Right.
And burned much of the major structure that had been established.
Right.
And the labor that was used was slave labor. A lot of some of the free blacks and slaves, most of the slaves, lived in the alley dwellings behind the master's house. So we have these huge alleys. People ask, why are some of the alleys so wide? They're so big. People living in alleys because they used to live in alleys during that period. And so slave labor supplied much of the work that went on with the construction of the later on with the streets, with the buildings. They helped rebuild the White House. They helped rebuild the Capitol. These are the public buildings. They helped rebuild. They worked on the wards over in Georgetown. They helped pave the streets. They did all of that. Not that other immigrants didn't help, but slave labor was free labor. And so they used much of that.
Would you please, this is something, there was a time when my home away from home was the Lowe's Hotel at L'Enfant Plaza. Now, there's a big area down there called what I just said, L'Enfant Plaza.
Yes.
The little small circle called Benjamin Banneker Circle.
Right.
Can you please address, if you know the circumstances, there are a lot of folks that said that Benjamin Banneker actually was the designer and the architect of a lot of what is Washington, D.C., and Pierre L'Enfant got the credit.
Well, L'Enfant got the credit, but L'Enfant was actually commissioned by the president to lay out the city.
Right.
He brought in Andrew Ellicott to help him to lay out the city. So Andrew Ellicott brought in Benjamin Banneker because they both had been from Maryland. And Benjamin Banneker was a surveyor.
Right.
So Benjamin Banneker actually put the final touches to the master plan for this new city. So he did the surveying of the city.
Okay.
L'Enfant took much of the way we look in terms of our city from France. From France. We have all the fountains and the parks and all of that.
Right.
But L'Enfant actually was able to lay it out the way he wanted it.
Right.
But they fired L'Enfant because he was so difficult. So Andrew Ellicott and Benjamin Banneker were the ones who actually ended up laying out the city as we know it today.
Right.
Yes.
And so
And we should have a bigger circle than that little circle down in Southwest.
I was getting ready to say, I was
Yes.
getting ready to say again, as we look at tributes to people that made a difference. There's a school, there's a Banneker school here and there. But again, you look at all that territory down there in Southwest Washington, D.C., that is L'Enfant Plaza. And it always sort of irritates me that you've got this one little circle
I tell you
that's
something
called Benjamin, that where you give Benjamin Banner that little tiny bit of credit.
The other thing that irritates me is the fact that almost every circle you come to, there's a man on a horse.
Right.
A man on a horse that fought during some war of 1812, whatever the war was, World
Right.
War I, whatever it is.
Right.
And he fought and he's on a horse in this big park, and he's gone.
Right.
And nobody knows much about him. They don't know history about him. Somewhere in those parks around that man ought to be some local history.
Yeah. Yeah.
We ought to have some local history.
Yeah.
To
Such
show-
as.
Well, we talk about Benjamin Banneker. They are doing away with schools, changing schools. So when you change schools, you change the name of the blacks who were here early on.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So the names are lost.
Mm-hmm.
John F. Cook. John F. Cook was one of the ex-slave
Right.
who became one of the minister and founder of the Colored Presbyterian Church, which is now 15th Street Presbyterian Church on 15th Street Northwest. We have one school on P Street named for him. Okay?
Right.
But if anything happens to that school, that's the end of the history of John F. Cook.
Right.
And you have so many people who came through here. Langston, you talk about Carter G. Woodson. They're finally doing something with Carter G. Woodson, but they've been forever doing the house. Because the federal government's not putting the money into it to make it happen.
Can we examine for a little bit here the relationship to the city? Well, the Washington D.C. now has home rule,
Right.
and at one point it didn't have home rule.
Right.
So now Washington D.C. residents can elect their own officials. Congress still has to approve the District of Columbia budget. Can you talk to us about, prior to home rule, what the process was for district leaders, how the city was funded and how the city was represented, and then after home, the difference that it has made after home rule?
Well, if you go back in time, we have had so many different forms of government. We had the commissioner, we had, first they had 3 commissioners, then they had territorial government. All those existed, and they had a governor and a city council back in 1800, okay? And then that fell through. Then Alexandra Ball Shepherd came along because the city was in bad repair.
Right.
And then he became the head of the Board of Public Works. And he put the city in $13 million worth of ruin.
Right.
And the city went bankrupt in 1873. And so, and we've had these territorial governments all along. But Washington, what happened is that when the white citizens began to lose the power that they had, the federal government decided to appease them by giving this federal subsidy, which is supposed to pay for half of your expenses.
Right. And this was like what period of time? What year?
You're talking about 1878.
When more and more blacks were starting to move in?
Oh no, blacks started moving in before that.
I'm saying, but
Yeah.
but in terms of when the city started to become
A large,
more have a almost an equal to or a larger than black population.
it was in 1865 when the Civil War ended. You had about 109,000 people into Washington D.C. But in 1800, you had a large free black population. You had free blacks equal to slaves. You had
So you had as many free blacks as there were slaves in
yes.
D.C.
Yeah, in 1800, you had 3,600 free blacks.
Right.
And then in 30 years later, you had 6,000 something.
Right.
You had 500 that were slaves. You had 500 free blacks that increased to 11,000.
Right.
So that was in 1830, 1840, during that period. So you had a large number of blacks in the city. Georgetown was a really black enclave. Because blacks worked on wharves over there. They worked along the riverfront.
Right.
In Georgetown, you had 1,000 families, black families, living on, on P Street between 29th and Rock Creek Park.
Wow.
And they were upcoming blacks. They had their own businesses, although a lot of them were domestics for people in the city. They worked as domestic busboys, gardeners.
So there was a thriving black community in Georgetown.
Yes.
Tell me this: what happened? What happened? How did it come that it was because there's still a church there?
Several churches.
Yeah, that are black churches.
Mount Zion is the oldest black church over there.
That's right. What happened? How did it happen? When did it happen that the migration started out of there, and you hardly see any blacks living in Georgetown now?
Well, several revolutions happened. In 1835, you had that snow riot. Because blacks had gained blacks had schools and businesses, free blacks.
Yes.
The first post office was built over there in Anacostia. Blacks began to get into, the free blacks began to build their own communities.
Right.
Then you had the snow riot in 1835. And that's where the whites attacked free blacks, businesses, schools, churches, burned them,
Right.
intimidating blacks and abolitionists.
Right.
And after that, you began to have blacks to move about within the city. But you also had people who began to go to Georgetown and began to purchase up some of those properties and move people out.
Wow.
And so but you still have a strong black family unit in Georgetown, but nothing like it was before.
Right. Dr. Harris, we have 2 minutes left. This has just gone by so fast. Let me ask you, talk to me about Washington, D.C. today. July the 27th, 2013, there has mass development, incredible gentrification. What would you have to say today of a hopeful nature for the remaining black community and how this city can get along with itself better than it ever has before?
Well, one of the things I think we need to do is educate our people on what statehood means.
Yeah.
So that we can get full statehood.
Yes.
That's number one. And it's so many things out there. There's full voting rights. There's all these different things going on. Budget autonomy. We need statehood, which gives us all of that. That's number one. We need to galvanize our community to talk to neighborhoods, because your neighborhoods are changing. And suburbanites are coming in and living like suburbanites in our neighborhoods, and that's not how we live. So we need to come and do that. We have dogs running everywhere, bicycles everywhere. That's okay. But within the confines of this neighborhood, there needs to be some understanding of how we live and how we live together.
Right.
And that's missing.
Right.
People just coming in without being educated on
Okay.
where they're going and what kind of life they're going to live in this city.
Well, please promise me you will come back.
Yes, I will.
In the not too distant future. There's so very much for us to talk about.
I'll be pleased to.
Thank you for joining us here on Rock.
It's the Rock Newman Show.